This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern. Every week we bring you conversations with authors about the books and research and other things that we like. And if you like us, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter by going to our homepage. That's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review. Scroll down to the bottom and click the big red button that says Patreon. Click and support us. Some of you have been doing this for months and years, and we simply cannot thank you enough. This episode is part of a series in partnership with the Institute of Advanced Israel Studies at Brandeis University's Schusterman Center for Israel Studies. My guests today are two fellows at the Institute. One, Rona Aviram, is a scientist with a special interest in the history of science, a postdoctoral fellow at the Weizmann Institute of Science. And the other, Omer Benjakob, is an investigative journalist with a background in the sociology of science. Their joint research is focused on Wikipedia as a vehicle for the dissemination of information and knowledge about anything from genetics to Zionism. Rona Aviram, Omer Benjakob, hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
So a lot has been said about the IT revolution and the way the internet and AI have been shaping our perception of knowledge and continue to do so at a more rapid pace than ever. But a particularly salient arena for that has been Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia that was launched in 2001 and became the go-to source for specialists and lay people alike. Maybe we can start by trying to understand the centrality of Wikipedia. In what ways would you say that the shaping of knowledge has been most affected by Wikipedia specifically?
I think it's a really good place to start because I think for a long time we lived in a period in which Wikipedia was kind of like a symbol of everything that was sucked or was bad about the internet, and that like if that idea kind of resonates with you, that means you're probably over 30, right? And then we entered an age in which like Wikipedia was this kind of like almost relic of a conservative internet, like, you know, compared to Twitter and compared to a lot of social media, and that means you're probably under 30 if that's your experience. And now we're entering, I think, a new phase in which it becomes completely opaque, it becomes completely transparent because of the ChatGPT. But in its essence, I would say Wikipedia is the defining source of knowledge in the digital age. It's an intellectual project on par, from my perspective, with the big encyclopedias of the Enlightenment, but tailor-made for the digital age. And Wikipedia, as a kind of, you know, almost iconic brand at this point, is, from my perspective, kind of the symbol and vehicle and the way we kind of consume and understand information in the digital age, because a lot has been said about, you know, disinformation and how social media is bad and so on and so forth. And Wikipedia kind of, before we even explain why it kind of avoids that whole debate, just at its very core level is actually a website focused on facts and knowledge in a way that I think very few things online are.
So just to elaborate on what you said about the source of knowledge, I think it is important to say that Wikipedia kind of is reporting existing knowledge. It's not a source of manufacturing knowledge. And I think as someone that spent many years in academia, which is actually the source of the facts that are being disseminated on Wikipedia, it's important to think about the state of, let's say, my research or any type of research, how it is kind of disseminated or published to the external world, like outside of academia, in a way that the scientific papers have their role and their audience, but I can honestly say not many people read my papers from the lab, right? They read the report that's written about it on Wikipedia.
But someone writes that report. I mean, the whole process is just remarkable. It's really a momentous task to bring so much knowledge that is esoteric and unavailable to most to such a wide audience. How did it reach that stage, and why specifically Wikipedia? How come that, unlike so many things on the internet, knowledge in this sense is not devolved. I mean, Wikipedia is really the go-to source.
I think the reason this really touches to what Rona said about, kind of where knowledge originates today, right? So you think about academia, you think of like that's Rona's world, or journalism, which is more my world. There's this kind of almost group of people who are like fact makers, right? And you put facts in the public domain, but not everyone is reading, the New York Times or Haaretz or academic journals,
or
right?
Science or Nature.
Or Science or Nature, let alone all the million others like second, third, fourth tier kind of publications there are. And Wikipedia has stepped into this very important historical role that we've had, which is summing up existing knowledge, right? And what Wikipedia brought to the table or managed to do in a really unique way is take this idea of crowdsourcing, which is this idea of, that as many eyes and as many hands as possible will make a system better, even if it's not organized, if there's no single boss, right? And brought that to this kind of really tedious task of organizing facts. And what they managed to do is something that I think very few people have thought about on social media, is just put together kind of a criteria or a system for how a certain fact, what is considered a fact, right? If you come from this almost like philosophical perspective, Wikipedia is not interested in what's true or not. It's interested in what a fact is. And the answer to that question, what is a fact, is what has a source. So this idea that every factual claim needs a source is kind of the core logic of Wikipedia. And that, when you bring that to a kind of collective group, then you can do good things. Unlike, with social media, when you're focused purely on interaction, for example.
I think what's also important to say is the interface and the technology of Wikipedia facilitates something that's tapping into something very appealing, which is it's very easy to contribute. It's very easy to contribute something even small but meaningful. It's easy to revert a mistake. It's easy to add a source. Everything, the interface that has, it doesn't require coding. It doesn't require even a lot of thought. It just requires you to pause and click a button and say what you think.
I also want to just jump on and say, I think Wikipedia, like just to answer your kind of original question, how it actually works. So there's this online, there's like Newton's law, right? So there's this thing called Cunningham's law, which is like one of the laws of the internet, right? And Cunningham law says that the best way to find the answer to a question on the internet is not by asking a question, it's by writing the wrong answer. Because someone is going to correct you. And this compulsive need to correct people online is what drives social media mad, but what pushes Wikipedia forward. Because Wikipedia created a very constructive framework, tapping it like in my kind of MA research I call this debugging the Enlightenment. They're trying to they create a structure in which this crowdsourced logic can actually do good fact-checking work, but they've managed to harness this collective energy, not for spreading hate or kind of pissing like fighting, which is what we see on social media, but rather for doing this very tedious task of either fact-checking or writing. And I think the question of who's writing Wikipedia is actually a very, very, very important question, because obviously it's not me and you. And I think, like democracy, Wikipedia has proven that though anyone can participate, not everyone chooses to do so.
At least in scientific articles, this has been part of our research. And you ask who is editing and adding all these facts. So this is something that we looked into, at least in some of our case studies. And we see a whole range of contributors, from active scientists, we call them scientific gatekeepers, to people who have maybe expert training. So they would be like the citizen encyclopedists that have training. They're not in academia, but they understand the topics, to people with actually just personal interest and kind of this passion to contribute. And this would be the lay citizen encyclopedia.
I wanted to discuss methodology later down the line, perhaps at more length, but this is a good opportunity to jump in and ask whether Wikipedia is, the whole process is transparent. I mean, can you extract the knowledge easily, or is it a black box? Are there any angles of it that are black boxed?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. So I think Wikipedia is a relic of this very kind of late 90s internet, in which you have this, like, on the one hand, very rich culture of anonymity, where you can remain anonymous, but you also have a very open open in the very old school of open source, open code, and also open as in transparent, where every action on Wikipedia is documented, every edit you do, every change to every page is recorded in Wikipedia.
Documented and easily accessible.
Yeah. So in that sense, I would say it's 1,000,000 times more transparent than any website you visit, any social media platform for sure. The rules governing Wikipedia are made by the community and are easily accessible. There's no fine legal print at any level. That being said, you can't always answer the question, who wrote that, right? And that touches to this kind of I would say ethic that Wikipedia inherited from the open source and this kind of early ideological internet, which juxtaposes openness with truth, I would say, or openness with veracity at some level, because they want as many people as possible to get involved, but they also understand that the more people involved, the more chances you have, for example, of vandalism, right? So you need to kind of counter, you have to kind of find ways to regulate and self-regulate. And Wikipedia is a self-regulating community, for better or for worse.
So maybe just to give an example, you can see which user wrote what and when. You don't know who the user is.
Yeah.
You don't know where they are in the world.
Wikipedia doesn't collect data
right.
on its users at
and this
all.
is also part of the
It's a non-profit. It's run by a non-profit. Yeah.
So that doesn't solve the core problem, which is you don't know the reliability of the source.
So that's, I would actually challenge that. You don't know the reliability of the editor, but you do have a source. So you can now do what you're supposed to do, which is check the source, right? And I'll say that this idea that there's a source is actually quite a lot. So for example, if I were to go on social media in May 2020 and write that I think that the best solution to COVID is putting like hot tea presses on my eye, right? I could post that, right? And no one, it would stay online till this day. If I were to go on Wikipedia, which is also a Web 2.0 website, right, and write the same thing, it would be deleted within a second because I don't have any source to back that up. And say I did have a source, some blog claiming this is true, then Wikipedia has an entire kind of argumentative or deliberative structure in which if I have another source, if someone else has another source saying that's BS, then that source will win because it's from a peer-reviewed journal, for example.
This is an important distinction that we should make. It's the source that's backing the claim.
Exactly.
Not who is writing the claim.
And I think you can always, this idea of a hierarchy of sources is something that is in a sense ingenious. Like I always say on social media and generally on the internet, all links look the same. This is one of the biggest problems we have online. In the old world, you could see that Nature looks like a really good journal while the New York Post looks like a tabloid, right? But in today's day and age, all links look the same. And when you post something on social media, those little info boxes all look the same. All websites look the same on Google, right? And Wikipedia manages to draw a distinction and say, no, this anonymous blog is not on the same level as a peer-reviewed academic journal. Certainly not on a medical subject in which we as a community will prefer the peer-reviewed journal. And that allows, for example, completely lay editors with no background in medicine to enforce medical standards because they'll just look at the link and say, hey, that looks like a blog. There's no DOI. It's not from the Lancet. It's not from any good. No, I'm just going to undo this edit because it doesn't meet our criteria. And I think that is a really important aspect, this hierarchy of sourcing.
This is also very much intentional.
Very much.
One of the guidelines is that you don't argue from authority.
Yeah.
So my opinion as a PhD is not more relevant to the topic of the source than Omer's credentials.
Yeah, and any editor can kind of counter any claim. I think if you really want to take a critical perspective on Wikipedia, the challenge is actually at this exact moment, because Wikipedia is also to blame for the erosion of expertise in today's world. We live in a fully wikified society in which people think that hive mind and crowdsourcing is the best solution to everything. You believe the ways get you to work fastest. You believe that recommendations built on collective knowledge are the most accurate. And people who are older than 30 and remember the phase of history in which that was not common knowledge will remember that there was a time where we actually trusted expertise and it wasn't always a bad thing. You know what I mean? Like expertise also, there was a hierarchy of knowledge.
But actually you're saying that Wikipedia is reliant on expertise, and this is the whole point.
Exactly. That's kind of the paradox with Wikipedia. It actually, Wikipedia appears in the early 2000s as something that's supposed to be like completely revolutionary. And in retrospect, you look, it's actually a quite conservative encyclopedia. It's managed to recreate much of the biases, or also in the good sense, it actually has a very like hardcore reverence for authority, the same authority that it's society, like it's socially gutted, right? Wikipedia is more important than Rona today, de facto. You know what I mean? Wikipedia is more important than professors. But
no, but how do you think that it really
more important than journalism?
Yeah. How do you think it fended off those attacks on expertise? Is it really the source of its power is that it's product masquerading as expertise, or vice versa?
The proof is in the pudding. One of the key milestones in this respect was a Nature study that was done in 2005, where they compared Wikipedia to Britannica. And experts compared entries on the same topics and saw that Wikipedia was at least as good as Britannica on many topics. And this kind of opened the door to try and really see, like, does it actually work? And in truth, it does.
There's a great joke on Wikipedia that Wikipedia never works in theory, but only works in practice. And then there's a really funny debate if Wikipedia is there for true Marxism or actually true capitalism, because it never works in theory, but only in practice. They're a very smart community, and they have this kind of joke. And I think Wikipedia, at a very fundamental level, works. I think it also dialogues in a very interesting and perhaps concerning way with the wider shift from knowledge to information. Because I think there's also a deeper kind of ontological sin on Wikipedia, where Wikipedia is the encyclopedia of the Google age. And the Google age has nothing to do with knowledge that me and you and want to consume in the form of books. And has everything to do with information in the way that Google kind of, or computers will see that information, which now is the kind of basis for AI, and we can get there. But I think there's something really interesting to be said about that same kind of relationship where Wikipedia is built on human knowledge, and what it actually helped do is kind of help that knowledge translate into the digital age in a way that Google could kind of read, and 15 years down the line OpenAI can train their models on for free.
It's not really the same.
No,
yeah.
It's not the same, but I think there's structurally something interesting about it, because Wikipedia also always had this duality. And I think it also, I like this position of being, it's an amazing thing online, but we also need to be critical of this wider shift. Wikipedia, the same way it eroded expertise, it also helped shift us to a much more informational view of knowledge, in the sense where your encyclopedia is gigantic today. You know what I mean? You could never buy it for someone as a gift for them to read. Maybe that's a good thing, yeah?
No, I just want to take issue with the fact that you say that it eroded the how did you say, like, they eroded the expert, the role of expert?
Yeah.
Okay, but let's just pause on this and say that the causality here is not really clear. We always say that Wikipedia reflects the biases that already exist in society. So I mean, there is this feedback, of course, but and being critical is important. But
so here is a good time to discuss topics that are, say, scientifically ironclad, and those that are more debated. I mean, as we said, your work is on anything from genetics to Zionism. Genetics is, there's probably differences of opinions between researchers in the field, but obviously it's not as wide as those on Zionism. How does it work differently when it comes to things that are more politically charged than others?
I would actually take us really far back to Central Park 13 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 decades ago, because we had kind of a more basic argument that was structured it was posed in a similar way to that question.
This was before we started this project.
This is before we started this project, yeah. This is kind of the nexus of the origin of this project. And we argued if Wikipedia would reflect the science in what Rona was doing her PhD in, which is chronobiology, right?
We argued more principally on Wikipedia, and then the idea was to put this to the test.
Exactly, but I think what I was speculating was kind of what Gilad was asking, which is, I said, I think on science, it's going to be really, 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 really accurate. And I think the more you go to political stuff, it's going to be a bit more harder to kind of gauge. And I think from a scientific perspective, we wanted to gauge just the scientificness of your expertise, because we said, okay, if this is the real stuff or not, and something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the early discussion was about Wikipedia reflecting things about society, and then we said, let's check science, which is my field of expertise, and we looked very deep into the field of chronobiology. This was the major of my PhD, and we started by basically reading the article.
We read 5,000 versions, 500 or something.
So we read all of the articles,
because all of them are catalogued.
Yeah, you just go back in time.
It's one click away from the page you're actually reading. It's addictive, and really. I think we really encourage everyone who reads Wikipedia to press the view history, go back, read about it, and just also in this point maybe mention also the page information, which is very important. Like just investigate a little bit.
What's in it? What's in the page?
So in the page information of every Wikipedia article, you get things like when was it open, when was it last edited, how often is it being edited, and these are things that are very important to be like smart consumers of Wikipedia.
Yeah, we all need to learn how to consume digital content in a much smarter way. And I think Wikipedia easily lends itself to people who want to do that. And I think like what Rona is saying is really important. Like in a sense, like going back and understanding who opened this page, when, how many people read it, like how many people are involved in its content. Like is it one? Is it 15,000? Like both could be equally true. Yeah.
If the system is based on crowdsourcing, then just see how big is the crowd. And this is important.
It tells you a lot, yeah.
And I think like what we saw going back, at least from my perspective as someone who at that point was completely stuck in their MA in history of science, was like, oh my God, this is just like history of science porn. Like it's amazing. Like you can see blow by blow these like super minute changes in the text. The problem is I don't know anything about science, and I don't know if these minute shifts that I'm now seeing in these articles about like circadian clocks and whatever mean anything. And
so, the amazing thing was, and I think this is kind of the revolution of our research, is that once I read the page and I saw a very interesting passage about how the clock works. And this is something that I was very interested, because this was literally the topic of my PhD, molecular work. We won't go into it today, but it's the question of how the clock works actually was revolutionized in the last decade or two. And then I thought this is very interesting because I'm reading a very current version of the information that's available about it. And I thought, I wonder who added that and when, because I knew there was controversy years back. So what we could do with the edit history of this very specific page was look at all the versions going back and reading all about how the clock works at different time points throughout its history. And what we managed to see is that the article's history represented a sort of a paradigm shift in this question and in the knowledge of how clocks work. So we can really see the different steps of the revolution. And I think this is something that was very kind of mind-blowing for us and kind of gave way to the idea that we can use Wikipedia as a digital archive to see modifications in how knowledge progresses.
If Wikipedia is meeting its even the most basic standard of presenting up-to-date knowledge, and that's been true for, let's say, at least 15 years, there is a literal gold mine of intellectual history data available online. Historical record, easily researchable, much easier than going into any archive, in any library. You can do this in your own home. We're actually putting forward now like tools that will allow people to do this. And you can do this about anything. Like, so we started from clocks, and then we were supposed to like do a really cool fellowship in Paris, and then COVID. So we ended up not going to Paris, but doing research about COVID. And then we saw this play out in a very small scale in terms of time, but like in a much grander scale in terms of number of articles. And we saw how the same system managed to kind of, also deal quite well with the COVID pandemic and the kind of questions arising around like knowledge in that space. And then later we did manage to go to Paris, and then we kind of managed to formalize these kind of ideas that we were, or these methods that we were doing, to actually put forward some systematic method and protocol for how to actually do this research. And I think the CRISPR study we did on the genetics history is, I think, from my perspective, like the best kind of wrap up at this point of, no, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just important to highlight that the way that we work is through case studies. So each time we kind of tackle a different field, from chronobiology to genetics. The beginning, at least until very recently, we try to look at the scientific topics and scientificness of topics. So you can really kind of have this kind of what you imply, that there is at least aspiration of facts and truth in science that we can rely on as a sort of internal control of what was true at the time. Believed to be true, or at least agreed on. There's this consensus aspect. So moving from different case studies, this allowed us to establish a methodology and tools to help us run this type of research each time on different case studies, and to bring us back to Zionism. This is like a spin-off of everything that we already did, now trying to take these tools and apply them on a whole different field with very different mechanistics.
So going back to what you said earlier, Omer, about how it's different from the way social media works, how do the articles, all the knowledge about Zionism in Israel, how does it not backslide into this tug of war that we know from social media? You know, so many people editing the article according to their own views.
So Wikipedia has one of the most interesting things it has put in place is also social guidelines on how to conduct yourself on Wikipedia. And the same way this sourcing policy creates a very basic kind of, civility, or at least like intellectual civility, then Wikipedia's kind of just code of conduct, like rules to your fellow Wikipedian, go a long way. That being said, Israel, Palestine, India, Pakistan, and Jews in Poland are the three most contentious topics on Wikipedia, and there is literally no conflict in the world in which Wikipedia has not been pulled into its fray.
And you know
at some
that they're
level.
contentious because of the number of edits that they have?
So that's a really good question. So Wikipedia, because of these mechanisms, actually, accepts that, for example, the article for the Prophet Muhammad or, Benjamin Netanyahu are inherently more conflictual than the articles, say, for iPhones or the font or some font, right?
But this is not like to say Wikipedia, except this
it's
a community of
Wikipedia
editors.
Community of editors. There's no centralized thing. So there's a community of people who try to enforce mechanisms, and then over time they realize that there are certain what they call topic spaces which are more contentious, and then they put in special rules. So the Israel, Palestine, India, Pakistan, and like a few others they have the strictest rules governing them. For example, not everyone can edit them. So any article on Wikipedia, anyone can edit. You don't believe me? Open your phone or laptop right now. Just hit edit. You can, unless it's one of these locked, sensitive articles. And there's a very large gradient of like sensitiveness on Wikipedia. The Israel-Palestine stuff is like top of the bench. And
but
that
you can, if from let's say an academic perspective, you can actually get answers to this from, let's say, the number of edits, the number of
100%,
reverts.
yes.
Yeah. So there
You can
are
think
like
of
metrics of
controversial-
contentiousness.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
how do you become a verified editor to be able?
Oh,
to...
that's a great question. It's like that great line from The Wire where it's like seniority sucks unless you're a senior. So if you edit, say you're like, don't go out a lot and you like to edit, and you do that, say, for like 15 years, so that would be one good way to get status on Wikipedia. But Wikipedia is built
like
on your experience.
Record.
Yeah. In that sense, it's really built on this anonymous culture where you can be anonymous, but your username, you live and die by your username. And people will invest 20 years in their username, and their username will be a random collection of letters. But for them, it's like, and you look at their homepages.
Yeah, the user also has a Wikipedia page.
Yes, each user has their own user page, which is like what you would call on social media your profile, but it's not the right way because you can fashion it any way you want, and you can express yourself in any way you want. And they take pride in their work, and they're actually very much accountable to their actions. And
it's not only what they advertise. Everything that they do is logged. So
exactly,
as a researcher, you can...
see their edit history.
And any person, even, you can really see their activity and see which topics they're interested in, what they're editing. So there is actually traces of what you're doing on Wikipedia that's undeniable.
Yeah.
Do you have insight into who they are?
So, okay, I want to say two things about this. So, yes, part of what we were initially doing in our study was also trying to kind of use some of my journalism skills to actually find some of these people. And we found that to be very lucrative in the sense where it's very nice to see, like, that's how we discovered what Rona explained earlier as these kind of archetypes of Wikipedia editors. So like the citizens, the citizen encyclopedist or the scientific gatekeeper. We found these different types of like actual people involved in scientific editing. But that's because they were willing to disclose those kind of things, and we did reach a lot of dead ends. So that's kind of one aspect of it. To circle us back into the Israel-Palestine, I want to say something really, really important, because I think your initial question was the right framing. Like, it's very different from the science stuff.
Absolutely.
Like, you asked me, how does it not deteriorate? It also did deteriorate, and I want to say that, and this is not part of our research, just in my opinion, I think that these different very conflictual arenas show the limits of Wikipedia's value, or test Wikipedia's value.
The mechanism, not only the value. it tests the actual mechanism.
No, but also the value in the sense where I don't fully think that if you want to learn about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm not sure reading all the Wikipedia articles would reflect you would learn a lot. What you would learn is that some people think this and some people think that. Like
to know that, you have to read you have to read a lot of articles.
That's also true. Like, so maybe I'll zoom out a bit. I have a joke when I give lectures about Wikipedia that there's what I call the 2-article solution. This is part of Wikipedia's conflict mechanisms, right? You think this, I think that. Let's just give each side their own article, right? 2 articles for 2 peoples. And then for a
partition plan. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And for a long time, you had these kind of parallel universes on Wikipedia, even in English. And let me just zoom out for a second. This is, I think, one of Wikipedia's biggest intellectual sins, in the sense where Wikipedia is the first encyclopedia to have actually conflicting knowledge within it. So, like, if you compare just randomly Hebrew Wikipedia and Arabic Wikipedia, let's assume that the article, say, for Jerusalem is not identically worded, right?
We don't have to assume. We check
Yeah,
this.
which I know. But like I'm saying, like, so anyway, you have these kind of what I call autonomies of knowledge living on Wikipedia. But let's just stay only in the English space. For many years, it was this kind of he said, she said, two-sidedism, which I don't think is very productive and is not a good look, I'll say. There's a lot of kind of like, every argument you got, the two kind of competing, almost radicalizing narratives over them over time. And I think it became just, the topic space looks very, very contentious. And what actually emerged over time is that there were these cliques of editors, pro-Israel, quote unquote, pro-Palestinian, quote unquote, fighting each other and then getting banned for trying to, fighting too hard against each other. And I think this kind of kept happening over and over again. And it now happened also again in the wake of the war. And we have now, I think there's like the 6th, right? It's the 6th Arabcom. Like, Wikipedia has this high court. There's is made up of volunteers, but it's called Arbitration Committee, and they've now convened for the 6th time or something, and they've banned 14 people again. So
is it public?
All this is public, of course.
So I'm trying to figure out the degree of anonymity in all this. On the one hand, you said that it's really hard to penetrate that community and see these people for who they are. On the other, it's very transparent, as you say. I mean, can you?
So you have access to some of the data. You have very easy access to the user and what they wrote. Who is the user? This is something that you'd have to go one step beyond.
Did you try to contact them and interview them?
On this particular topic, no.
No, but also a lot of them use their names. Yeah, it's not. I don't think that's the point. The point is it's all usernames. What you said now is true about any website
no,
online.
But you're not interested in who these people are?
I think the interesting question, at least to me, is the implications of what they're doing. I'm not really interested in who wrote it, but what is the current view of, let's say, Zionism on Wikipedia. And I think what Omer described is a very interesting situation, which I'm not sure I totally agree or disagree with the criticism, because the fact of contradicting information, let's say, is some mirror of our reality.
Yeah, we
right?
live in a conflicting
What do you do?
Right.
What would you have Wikipedia do? Would we be better off if there's one article written by, quote unquote, an expert about what Zionism is, or do we want to have few articles with crowdsourced information about what Zionism is? And I'm not sure what I would opt for. And just we are observing an interesting trend, and I think maybe just to kind of give an example from our research that we actually convened to discuss, the topic of colonialism in Zionism. So this is something that if we kind of look at one of the biggest aspects of our research, which is the edit history, which we explained earlier, is that we noticed a very interesting drift in the location of the term Zionism, in the term colonialism, in respect to Zionism. So for many, many years...
Over the years, you mean?
Drift, she means in a physical location of the word in the body of the text.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is part of the stuff that is so interesting about the kind of work we do, where it's not that, post-October 7th, the first time this word appears, No. It was there.
It was there. It was there for many years.
Low.
under a subsection called criticism of Zionism. So you can have an article that boasts Zionism. It's the greatest thing ever. But there is editors who discussed the criticism.
And it's true. Yeah, it's true.
There is criticism about Zionism. It exists from an encyclopedic perspective. And criticism of Zionism had the concept of colonialism as a criticism, right? One of the criticisms.
And what happened now?
Not now, actually, but in recent years, it started migrating into a more central location in the text. Then it became critics, but it was in the lead of the article. There's a summary of what Zionism is, right? It's not now buried deep in a subsection below. Now it's in the lead, the summary, so you can find the term. But again, qualified under critics would say that there is colonialism post-October 7th. It's now in the first line of the article.
Oh.
Without qualification, with at least 7 different sources to back it
and now
up.
I want to say now something now just in terms of knowledge online, right? So Wikipedia, though I'm also critical of it, is also amazing because at least you see this, right? This is documented. We did this research. You can also see it and you can read the article, you can click and then so on and so forth. Wikipedia's knowledge is being decontextualized via GPTs and via Google, but mostly through the GPTs. Now you ask, hey, ChatGPT, I have a question for you about Zionism. What would you say that it's a colonial movement, yes or no? And the question of whether that term is in the lead or buried deep is important. And these shifts, because on Wikipedia, at least it was changing, right? You could say, like, it wouldn't have to stay this word. It could change in a different knowledge world or a different kind of, reality. But now it becomes much more finite, much more, it's a given product. And in that sense, I think Wikipedia's...
Not to mention that the footnotes are gone.
Exactly. You took the words out. And there's no sourcing. So now you're not seeing the line because you didn't ask if it was for criticism. You're just asking if it's yes or no question. Is it a settler colonialism, yes or no? And so you're losing the context, you're losing the source, and the real tragedy here is that Wikipedia is losing potential editors. Because Wikipedia's virtuous circle is that you're there, and you see that, and maybe you're pissed off by that, and maybe you try to fix it or edit it or correct it or amplify it or whatever. And maybe you have a source or you don't, but now you're down the Wikipedia rabbit hole. You're in their pipeline. You're part of this community. And if you're serious and you'll stick around, you might actually be able to contribute something from your knowledge to this very important kind of open database. But that's not happening anymore, right? Because now that it's late at night and you're talking to the GPT and he's just giving you dead answers, whatever he thinks you want to hear.
Yeah, and the quality of these answers depends on the quality of Wikipedia.
Yeah, I love that. Like in terms of like how critical we used to be of Wikipedia, and then how careless the GPTs are. This answer may contain mistakes. Wow!
No, but
wow, that's amazing. Like, did you just like that? Like, because I like the GPT, I use it a lot. But I think I feel this disclaimer is getting more vulgar and more shorter as time goes by. Right? It used to be like, the GPT can possibly make an error. Now it's like this may have errors. Like this is wrong, and you're like, oh my god! Like they're just climbing down the tree. You know what I mean?
And the more severe it gets, the less you care.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important point because I think we took Wikipedia for granted. And though I'm critical of it, I think people need to understand it's an amazing open common source and we need people to contribute much like we need people to participate in democracy. In that sense, I think it's identical. It's an identical challenge.
Yeah, it's a democratization of knowledge.
Yeah, and democratization comes with a price, but we also need people who are invested in knowledge and not just in,
One of the most important things that Wikipedia reflects upon itself is that it's a work in progress.
Yeah, always. And it can always get better. And any issue you may have with...
progress is important.
Yeah. And any issue you may have with what's happening now, even if you think that it's impossible to fix, it's not true.
So other than emptying the ranks, as you said, is there any danger in, or maybe potential with the AI revolution on how Wikipedia works?
I'm really conservative in that way, and I identify as what I call like digital enlightenment. I think the goal is to have knowledge for people, by people. And I think that we're seeing in the past 20 years, 30 years, a dehumanization of knowledge in a way that has kind of forgotten the goal. Because I think if you go back to Google, which is a very information-driven project, right? It's an information retrieval website. It was geared for you. It wasn't just about, this kind of, abstractization of knowledge so you could the way we're seeing now with large language models. And of course, progress happens and you can't stop anything. I'm not trying to be like regressive. I just think that at some point, like you have to remember that the stuff is built, like we're still in the process of the kind of the humanistic revolution, and we still have science to do. We haven't finished everything, you know what I mean? And I'm very sad and very wary to see people walk away from kind of the human side of knowledge creation. I think it's very important that humans sum up knowledge for other humans. I don't think machines should do that for us. I think in much the same way, I think people can read and write for themselves. It's okay. Of course, I use the GPT for research, but I think this human aspect that Wikipedia retains is really, really important.
Just to maybe more directly answer your question, the risks of AI, of course, are like numerous and beyond our expertise.
We can ask the GPT.
It definitely poses a risk to Wikipedia. I think this could be shown in terms of views to Wikipedia, which some reports are in decline. I check actually the views quite often. Every time I give a lecture about Wikipedia, I try to give accurate numbers and updated numbers, and
views,
I don't.
You mean the overall views?
Overall views to Wikipedia, are
article?
they in decline or not due to the GPT or whatever other reason, right? So if there was a very sharp drop in last months or years to Wikipedia, then you could say Wikipedia is losing also, because we know that there is a very tight connection and circle between views and edits.
Exactly.
Personally, I don't see it so much. At least not something very drastic that I could point to. So this is, it's definitely a risk that it poses.
I'll say maybe perhaps more internal Wikipedia answer. Wikipedia is dealing now, the community is dealing with a new form of disinformation they didn't have to deal with in the past, which is AI-generated slop and quote-unquote hallucinations. I don't like the term hallucinations. They don't think, so therefore they can't hallucinate. We'll call it slop. So this AI-generated garbage, which allows people to vandalize Wikipedia with greater ease. So Wikipedia would always be vandalized, but they were really good at fighting it. And I think they're now dealing with a slightly bigger kind of...
But if ChatGPT is not referenced, how can Wikipedia be vandalized with it?
Because you can create, like, for example, think of it, like, okay, so we didn't talk so much about this because vandalisms are kind of like, and disinformation is kind of easy to blow away with. But, like, if you want to do a really elaborate hoax, right? There's been tons of really funny hoaxes. Like, you want to invent some, made up Australian scientist doing some fake kind of science, right? And you make a really good page. You can get the GPT to do that, right? And to create 300 sources that look real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just making
more specifically, you can kind of flood Wikipedia with fake sources.
Exactly. You can. It just helps create kind of.
Then they're overwhelmed. And
exactly. Because it's hard to keep track of it. Anyway.
It's also important to state the positives about it. You can edit better articles. You can refine sources. You can.
It helps people overcome language gaps, which is a huge issue on Wikipedia. Wikipedia always had this kind of what they call abstract Wikipedia as a project. They want to link languages and want to make it interoperable and intertranslatable. And they want it to be a Rosetta Stone. In that sense, I think a lot of technological things actually work very well with the Wikipedia kind of dream. And I think the AI does also help in many ways. But I think there is a deep lesson here because Wikipedia, according to some preprint study, but I think it seems an interesting point from about a year and a half ago. Wikipedia was at some point the largest unitary source in large language models because it's a big, massive database. It's open to use. Wikipedia is not going to sue you. It's not Facebook. It's not YouTube. It's not the New York Times. They're not going to sue you. It's open. You're allowed to use it, and it represents literally millions upon millions of free human work that people did because they believed it should be in the common space, right? And this is now being taken. This is why the GPT is good because of Wikipedia. Yeah, I'm trying to say, and I'm not sure that Wikipedia will be as good as it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years down.
It's like a parasite in a way.
In a way, it is, and I think this kind of parasitic relationship is something we've seen in the past play out in a lot of dynamics in technology. This is my opinion. This is not our research.
Yeah, but I do want to say something that's a bit like maybe naive.
No, it's okay.
And this is something that we spoke about often, is that Wikipedia is very used to people challenging it, and
there's a great study by Joseph Riegel, who's like the professor of Wikipedia studies in the world, genius, really great guy, Joseph Riegel, and it's a great text called "The Many Reported Deaths of Wikipedia," and he spends how over 20 years everything was supposed to destroy Wikipedia, and
the many predicted deaths of Wikipedia.
And by the way, you also have that apropos the Zionism. There's a really funny list. Wikipedians are very funny. They have lists like internal joke lists. So there's a list of all the cabals that Wikipedia has been accused of having, and it's everything. So you have like the pro-Zionist, the anti-Zionist, like the pro-clown, the anti-clown, like because every field has a cabal that they think someone is out to, like anti-Pilates people, like everything. So in that sense, yes, Wikipedia has been accused of everything. Everyone said it's going to die, and
there are many threats because it only works in theory. In practice,
it never works in theory.
All right, and on this, we'll wrap up. Rona Aviram, Omer Benjakob, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
And also many thanks to Itai Shalom, the manager of TLV1 Studios, and to the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies for the generous support. And now we've got a request because many or most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app, and we would like to ask you to please consider writing us a review. Bad, ugly, good, up to you. You too can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto our Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has more than 1,000 interviews by now. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and now on Blue Sky as well. But most important, join us again next time for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from us here in Tel Aviv, goodbye.